Hey, good news, y'all. Megyn Kelly's trying to make the Salem witch trials great again. Now, I know what you're thinking. Tammy, there's no such thing as witches. Clearly, you've not seen the new documentary, Weapons. Seriously, though, a coven on Etsy did not kill Charlie Kirk. That would be a sick individual with a gun. But let's see what Megyn Kelly has to say.
A sort of out of left field story to bring to you. And then I want to start with it. I've been wrestling with whether to bring you this story for a few days now. I've been wrestling because I find it so vile and off and odd. I wasn't even sure where to go with it. But I decided that I had to do it because the groups who did this deserve public censure. I learned when I was out in Arizona last week that 2 weeks before Charlie Kirk was assassinated, the far-left website Jezebel declared that it had a mission to cast bad luck or a curse on Charlie. They wanted to hurt him in some way. They declared, quote, if the far-right misogynist with a bad haircut wants to villainize independent women, Jezebel is more than happy to be the hag of his nightmares. And they went on to the website Etsy, yes, Etsy, to, quote, cast a curse on him. Yes, this is actually a thing. Etsy, the website known for making arts and crafts on demand, will happily cast a hex through its witches, who you can hire, on someone if you ask them to. The Jezebel crew was delighted to discover, quote, it's not uncommon for the so-called witches on Etsy to channel their energy toward thwarting Republicans. There's even a subreddit devoted to casting nightly hexes on Trump.
Which, have any of those been successful? Right? The nightly hexes on Trump? I don't think so.
Jezebel decided Charlie Kirk, who they've repeatedly described as far right.
Just like she said, Jezebel was far left, right?
The founder of the right-wing conspiracy theory factory, Turning Point USA, is, quote, more irritating than most, and asked its audience if they were, quote, interested in punishing Kirk for years of regressive rhetoric with a curse, with a hex on him.
That's basically like saying a pox on his house.
After all, they told readers, he's basically a fake news vending machine. The article notably does not list the name of any particular author, but simply uses its company name as the byline. So we don't know exactly which writer or staffer at Jezebel, which has long been a disgusting publication, came up with the idea. But since they're attributing it to all of them, so will we.
Do you see with what venom Megyn Kelly is speaking about Jezebel? Just because her beliefs and values don't align with Jezebel, she is speaking with such hatred. And you could see her face, like it's really animated. Like she really, really hates them. So she should be able to understand that maybe that's how some people felt about the way Charlie Kirk was talking about things. There's problems on both sides. It's not just a singular issue on the left.
In terms of our blame. It was, in fact, the brainchild of one writer, however, because it is written in the first person, a female. The writer explains now, is it ethical to curse a man I've never met? Probably not. But is it unethical to let him keep talking? Yes. Now comes the obligatory ass-covering paragraph in the piece, just to stave off any negative publicity for Jezebel. Quote,
so she's calling what she's about to read as an ass-covering thing. I don't think so. You know, sometimes there's just a coincidence. It just happened to be a coincidence that they released this article about the curse, and unfortunately, just a few days later, he's gunned down by an assassin. If that doesn't happen, we never talk about Jezebel. We never talk about the Etsy coven ever.
I want to make it clear, I'm not calling on dark forces to cause him harm. I just want him to wake up every morning with an inexplicable zit. I want his podcast microphone to malfunction every time he hits record. I want his blue blazers to suddenly all be one size too small. I want one of his socks to always be sliding down his foot. I want his thumb to grow too big to tweet, to ruin his day with the collective feminist power of the Etsy coven would be my life's greatest joy.
Okay, as far as curses go, I would say that that's tame. That's a little on the benign side. So I'm feeling it's not bad, right? Not too bad.
So even in her ass covering, she was asking for Charlie to be rendered less attractive, to not be able to use his microphone and silence his voice, to have discomfort foisted upon him, to stop his ability to tweet or spread his message, and to, quote, ruin his day. Got it? That's the nice part of the Jezebel article. She tells the reader she placed her first spell on Etsy, and it was, quote, in all caps, make everyone hate him. And she wondered aloud, how long would it take to kick in? The witch.
Okay, so Megyn Kelly just said the witch. So is she a witch that you believe in, or is it a witch? Because usually air quotes infers it's pretty loose. You don't really believe in it, but the person is saying it.
Servicing Jezebel on Etsy contacted the writer and asked if she would like to, quote, amplify the energetic support of the spell for an extra $50. She did it.
What does that sound like to you, right? Somebody's hitting you up for some more cash? Does it sound like something that you might think,
She goes on, for the powerful hex spell, I had to provide Kirk's date of birth for accuracy.
It's a ruse, maybe?
The witch informed her that she, the witch, had performed the hex and that it was successful. Jezebel wanted to know when they were getting results on their curse. And while their article about all of this it was published on Monday, September 8th, it makes clear that the writer contracted for the curse in late August. She says she wanted it to line up with the new moon in Virgo, which this year meant August 23rd. That tracks because she points out in the piece that by August 24th, she was waiting impatiently for results. The witch, they reveal, promised on August 23rd that, quote, you will see the first results within 2 to 3 weeks. This was 18 days before Charlie was killed.
Kind of sounds like a package that you're waiting for delivery, right? When's it going to be there? In 5 to 10 business days.
Not satisfied with this curse, the amped up one, alone, Jezebel reached out to a, quote, third witch, Priestess Lilin. Jezebel opined, if enough people cursed a single person, would the results be stronger? Quote, when I asked her if she'd noticed more political figures being targeted these days, she said yes. The next day, Lilin sent the Jezebel writer proof of the hex she had cast, quote, a photograph in flames, the edges slowly curling inward, engulfing Charlie's ridiculous, scrunched up little face. She whispered, I imagine, writes the Jezebel reporter, trust the unseen. Chills, writes Jezebel. Sunday, August 24th passed, writes the author, and nothing. Monday, August 25th, still nothing. Tuesday, August 26th, nothing. But then she writes, she reminded herself, this is witchcraft, not Amazon. The forces operate on their own schedule. The Jezebel writer ends the piece as follows. So, did my Etsy curses work? Time will tell. The forces move in mysterious ways. And as the priestess Lilin reminded me, spell work is a collaboration between the caster, the client, and the universe itself. For now, we can only trust in the timing of the great unknown. To you, Mr. Kirk, may the rash come swiftly.
To me, that definitely sounds like satire. Now, I know Megyn doesn't agree with it because it sounds like she was close with Charlie Kirk. Whenever something happens to somebody that you're close to, of course, it is personal. But if you don't have a personal connection to this person, you're not making these strange correlations.
2.5 weeks after those curses were requested and cast, 2 days after Jezebel published that article, Charlie was killed by an assassin's bullet.
Which is awful.
I know what you're thinking. This is a bullshit Etsy curse. Why are we spending time on this? I'm going to get to that in a minute. Stay with me for now. After the shooting, Jezebel took down the article, quote, on the recommendation of our lawyers. They underscored that the piece was meant to be humorous, intended as satire, and that they made clear they wished Charlie, quote, no physical harm, which is not the full story now, is it?
So Megyn Kelly is definitely saying that these witches killed Charlie Kirk, right? That's what she's saying. So does that mean that Tyler should not be held accountable for the shooting? That he was somehow under the mystical forces of Etsy witches? Is she going to go to the courtroom to try to testify that it's not his fault? He should be able to get off because really, it's this Jezebel writer and the Etsy witches. They're to blame.
At the same time, they said of the article, quote, "We stand by every word," which means they did want him cursed. They wanted everyone to hate him. They wanted it to be powerful. And they wanted Charlie, quote, punished for years of regressive rhetoric. They also made clear that taking down the article was, quote, driven by an abundance of caution for our staff. In other words, they were worried about violence against them by Charlie Kirk supporters.
Yes, that's exactly why they took it down. Wouldn't you be scared? If you have a lot of people that are getting whipped up because they're angry because somebody that they cared about got killed, I'd be scared too. I think in the day and age of which we live, where everybody's got a gun, there's more guns than there are U.S. citizens in our country, I'd be worried too. I definitely would not want that up. I would not want my name to be released. What does she think would happen if they release the woman's name that wrote it? What does she think? What's the potential that that person is going to be doxxed, harassed, or, God forbid, something much worse?
They wrote, wished, quote, to avoid the piece being misused in a tense and volatile environment. There was not, they made clear, any change in their editorial and judgment. In fact, they emphasized, quote, we may republish at a later date. They then rambled on about the country's gun problem and the heated political divide in the country and free speech, noting they do not actually condone political violence.
Why does she say it like that? That wink, wink, they don't actually condone political violence. Jezebel is a feminist-leaning publication. They are anti-violence, period. It's like Feminist 101. There is never a need for violence, ever, with the exception of if you're defending yourself.
Now, again, you may be saying to yourself, why are we talking about Etsy curses? None of this is real. Well, two things. First of all, Christians are opposed to casting spells or trying to contact the spirit world, not only because they believe there's only one God, but because they acknowledge the existence of the devil and evil spirits.
She's absolutely right. If you're a Christian, you're not allowed to get into anything that's considered mystical, period. So you know what that means? You're not allowed to go visit psychics, not allowed to get tarot cards read, definitely no Ouija board, but you're not even supposed to read the horoscopes because there's answers in the stars, but you're not allowed to know them. Do we think that Megyn's never visited a psychic or read a horoscope? Something tells me it probably has.
In other words, you're playing with fire, messing with this stuff. There actually are demons in this world. Calling up the spirit world, in particular the devil's spirit world, can actually have real world consequences. It's not something to mess with. Many Christians believe this. This is dangerous. It's not a game.
But not everybody in the country is Christian. You know, a lot of people would define themselves as agnostic, atheist. These people don't believe in these things. So, you know, this to them holds no power. Whatever the Etsy witches did or said, it holds absolutely no power.
It's literally evil. Second, this is what I really want you all and the people at Jezebel and Etsy to know. Erica and Charlie Kirk heard about these curses, and that news genuinely rattled Erica in particular. She knew Christian teaching on this subject. She loved Charlie, absolutely, and she was scared when she heard of the curses Jezebel had called up. So much so that she and Charlie contacted a friend who I believe she said was a Catholic priest, but definitely a friend, and asked him to come over and pray with them.
Ooh, you know it's the big guns when they call in the Catholic priest. What? Not a minister, not anything else. Had to be the big guns.
Over Charlie the night before he was murdered.
Well, then there you go. If the priest came over and prayed with Charlie, blessed him, sprinkled him with holy water, that should have been enough to wipe any of those curses away. That's what she's saying. She's saying if it's something is so strong like a curse, what happens when you have a powerful weapon of the church like a priest come in? He should be able to vanquish away those horrible curses.
She eventually worked it through, and so did Charlie. That, as she later told me, weapons will form but not prosper. That Satan and those witches have no power. Of course, God's will is the one that matters, and his blessing over Charlie was real and palpable. All you had to do was spend time with Charlie to know that. But why torture a family like this? A Christian, believing family. Why do this vile thing to a young couple, parents to two babies, living in accordance with the gospel, deeply in love?
Somebody that's doing a thing called a joke.
Of, yes, political, but doing nothing other than speaking publicly about their views and their desires to make other people's lives better. Who would do such a vile thing? Jezebel, that's who. And unbelievably, Etsy. And the people behind this evil, they should be called out. That's why I'm talking about it.
What does Megyn Kelly think is going to happen if they identify that person? I'd like to ask you, Megyn, what do you think would happen? I can tell you probably nothing good. And is she saying that she deserves it?
They should be called out. Jezebel should be forced to identify the woman who wrote this and did this. Jezebel should close, frankly. It has zero redeeming virtues or value. Etsy should stop this practice immediately and get back to arts and crafts and jewelry. And both entities should issue an immediate, full-throated apology to Erica Kirk for introducing this awfulness into her beautiful family and causing her or Charlie any distress whatsoever in what would be the waning hours of his life.
And that's basically the entire video. I mean, it is a little longer, but then she starts pimping gold. So, that's her little side hustle. But she doesn't want the poor Etsy witches to have their side hustle. Again, let me make this very clear. Death Note is not a documentary. Weapons is not a documentary. Etsy witches did not kill Charlie Kirk. That was an evil man with a gun. I'm telling you, it's the Salem witch trials all over again. Oh, look at this horrible thing that happened. Let's see if we can gather up some girls to blame. Now, bear in mind, Megyn Kelly left out a bunch of the article. And if you read the article in entirety, it is satirical. It is unfortunate that a young man was gunned down in the prime of his life, but that's not what this article is about. Let me just read like a quick little paragraph, and you tell me, do you think that this really sounds like somebody that has evil intent? The internet has ruined me in 1,000 ways, but one of its strangest gifts is that I can now buy a curse as easily as I can buy a phone charger. On the mystical website Etsy, you can find a spell for just about anything. Don't want it to rain on your wedding day? There's a spell for that. Want the man who cheated on you to develop an incurable rash or premature balding? The Etsy coven has got you covered. Just by watching Megyn's facial expressions when she was talking about Jezebel and reading the article, her facial expressions were crazy. She has some deep-seated anger and hatred over this. Let me be clear. I don't think anything about that article or the witches had anything to do with killing Charlie Kirk. That was a man with a gun. It would be a great thing if we all could just, tick the anger down a little bit and stop all the finger pointing and try to remember that we're all fellow Americans. And I think we can all understand that that was a tragedy, what happened to Charlie Kirk. But I think pointing fingers other than at the person who did it is a huge mistake. How are we to move forward when we can't even have a basic civil discussion? Hey, I know. I could hire the Etsy witches to get me some more subscribers. Or you could just hit the subscribe button yourself. That would be greatly appreciated. Well, thank you so much for popping by for one of my takes, and I'll see you later. Take care.